You are listening to a Sustainable World Radio podcast. Sustainable World Radio brings you in-depth interviews, news, and commentary about positive solutions to environmental challenges. Solutions that adhere to the permaculture ethics of earth care, people care, fair share. Are you interested in learning more about permaculture projects around the globe? How to plant a food forest? Restorative design or ethnobotany? Then stay tuned for Sustainable World Radio. I'm your host and producer, Jill Cloutier. My guest today is Kevin Childerley, owner of Santa Barbara Aquaponics. Kevin invited me for a tour of his aquaponics system where he grows a wide variety of produce, including the largest and most prolific tomato plant that I've ever seen. Kevin Childerley is a permaculture design course graduate, a contractor, and also a former head writer for a children's television series called Critter Getters, which is about a group of children who rescue animals. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy this tour of Santa Barbara Aquaponics. I pulled into Santa Barbara Aquaponics, pulled into the parking lot area of Santa Barbara Aquaponics, and looked around and noticed that actually the parking lot is where Santa Barbara Aquaponics is located. It's in a parking lot, which is amazing because they're growing all sorts of food. Hey, hi.
Hi, how you doing?
And Kevin Childerley, owner of Santa Barbara Aquaponics, met me at the gate. Hi, Kevin.
Hi. Come on in. So, what questions do you have?
How long has Santa Barbara Aquaponics been here?
Since September 2012.
And for listeners who may not know what we're talking about when we talk about aquaponics, what is aquaponics?
Aquaponics is the growing of fish and plants together in a symbiotic relationship.
This is so cool. So why don't you walk us through this? Show us what is going on here in an aquaponics system.
Okay. I'll start at the very beginning.
Okay, perfect.
This is where the fish are. And they're doing what fish do. They're basically swimming around. And they're pooping. And fish naturally give off ammonium. It secretes through their body and through their gills. And especially when they eat and they poop, that's more ammonium. And it's ammonium, not ammonia. We want the hydrogen molecule in the ammonium, and that's what's necessary for the conversion into nitrogen. So if we have too much ammonia buildup, and that happens in aquafarms, and it's very toxic to fish. It's like they're choking in their own environment. So, but the other thing is the byproduct of what they're producing is very beneficial for plants, but it has to be converted into nitrogen, and that's the missing ingredient.
So basically, this is floating around in the water. We can hear the water. Mm-hmm. And then what happens to that, where it's not a waste product?
What we're doing is we've got a lot of air pumping in here, which is oxygen, and it's really good for fish. That's what they need. That helps to basically break down the toxic levels of ammonia. It gives them fresh oxygen, and so that's like more breathing room. But that would not necessarily be enough if you have quite a lot of fish in a fairly tight environment. You still need to get rid of that water in order to refresh it. And so we take the water, which is naturally overflowing from the fish tank, and put it into a biofilter. So we're sort of cleaning up the fish environment and providing the nutrient to the plants at the same time.
So this water that's filled with this nutrient, this waste product, maybe in aquaculture it would be a waste product,
It would be very much a waste product, and in aquasystems and aquaculture, this water, they're constantly flushing out the water. They do add chemicals to alleviate the problem of ammonia, and so they're cleaning up the system constantly, and that's why if you buy fish from an aqua farm, you're getting a good fish, but you're also getting maybe things that you don't want to get in the fish too.
So in aquaponics, what you're doing is you're taking a waste product and converting that waste into something else. So you're stacking functions. This is permaculture.
Yeah, this is permaculture at its very essence of stacking functions. And on the same point as stacking functions, we're actually doing what nature does, which is emulating the patterns in nature. We're taking a beginning product and then we're sort of recycling it through to the end, but we're not creating anything new that's not in nature already. We're just enhancing the possibility of what nature can do.
And so in nature, what are you mimicking with this? I just heard an interesting sound. What are you mimicking with this system?
We're mimicking a lake, a stream, pond life. We're mimicking a natural environment, an ecosystem essentially. That's the bell siphon flushing, by the way.
This is so cool. So I wish that right now, I wish I had my video camera, but I see this screen right here.
Yeah.
And if I'll let the listeners hear. Sounds like running water. So what's underneath this?
Well, let me take it off.
Okay.
This is a screen. It's to protect the fish from marauders like maybe raccoons or coyotes, and also fish like shade. Generally, they like shade and a certain amount of protection. It stops contaminants falling in. But in a natural environment, this would be, you'd have a lot of bugs and things floating in there, and the fish want to eat them. But we also want to make sure we know what's going into our fish. So that's why we're sort of like kind of a little protective of their interests and our interests, and a cover we find very appropriate for that.
Okay, so let's see. I see the water. I don't see any fish in there yet. So what are you doing right now?
I'm putting the food, I have an automatic fish feeder right here. And you can hear that. It really exists. And then I'm going to go over to the fish tank over here. And so I'll take a little bit of water.
What do you feed your fish?
Fish food. This is pretty much a store-bought food that you can get. We want to be as pure as we can in our delivery of food to the fish, because eventually we will eat the fish, and what goes into the fish is a high quality protein and carbohydrate, and we know where it's been, and so we know what we're eating. If we put in a bunch of other stuff that you don't know what's going in the fish, you supposedly have to eat that, and in my view, you are what you eat, so I want to eat some good food if I can.
And what kind of fish do you have in the system?
We have channel cats.
Oh, I just saw one.
Yeah.
What? They just grabbed the food. Let's see. They're starting to come up to the surface. That was the channel catfish grabbing some food. How big are the fish in here?
We've got one in here is about 2 pound. The rest range for anywhere from a pound to just under.
And what made you choose channel catfish?
Channel cats survive in a wide range of temperatures. That's why they're very good for an outdoor aquaponic system. They're not finicky they can live in 40 degrees to even 90 degrees if they have to. They've been recorded in 90-degree temperatures.
They vary in size. How old are these fish?
These are probably just over a year old. Yeah.
One is giant. I just saw a few that are huge. They have whiskers.
They do. They have whiskers. They can hear. The smell is extremely sensitive. They're very sensitive to vibration, obviously. They're tremendous swimmers. Catfish they have incredible tails and dorsal fins that are very powerful. They're very powerful fish. They can live to about 40 years old, even longer, supposedly, and grow up to 40 pound and more in most ponds. But there's also been some monster catfish caught around the world in hundreds of pounds. They're a great fish. They're very old. There's in the realm of time, they're probably one of the oldest species of fish.
And what made you choose them? just because of the temperature, and also why not? I've heard a lot about tilapia being used in aquaponics.
Yeah, tilapia I think is the ultimate fish for an aquaponic system because they're super robust. There's a lot of species. They'll eat anything. And, they're pretty much ready for market in about 9 months, 8 months, 9 months. But there's been people growing them for more than a year, for 2 or 3 years, and getting 5-pound tilapia. So they're not just a sort of a plate fish. They can get, some species can get really, really big. So ideal for, they'll eat anything and survive in virtually almost mud. They're tremendous survivors. They're basically a tropical sort of an African fish, but they're sort of all over China, and mainly they like temperatures above 70 degrees and even sort of 80-degree water.
And how come you didn't choose them?
They're illegal. Fish and Game does not want this side of Thousand Oaks, so we're honoring that
Law.
that law. Yeah, it's a law, and so we honor that.
And why are they illegal?
They're considered an invasive species.
If they got loose.
If they got loose.
So they're tenacious, it sounds like.
They're tenacious. There's certain varieties that would survive in temperatures lower than 70 and 60, but not too many. Generally, they would die in those temperatures. They couldn't survive in those temperatures. So I think one of the reasons why they haven't invaded the waters higher in Southern California and north is because they would die. But on saying that, there probably are some species that could already be in the waterways, but in our operation, we're not going to entertain tilapia. We are going to go by the book.
Look at that one. Oh, it's huge.
I know.
And cute.
I know, isn't it?
So, all right. So you have the fish. How big is this tank?
This is a 280-gallon tank. This is an IBC. We have 500-gallon tanks that we're going to be putting in this year for expanding the system. This system was a trial run to see if we could actually make a system work and learn the dynamics and what can grow in this microclimate in this particular region.
Let's walk over here. We'll let the fish, it looks like they're still eating. Oh my gosh, their mouths are so funny when they come up. The question is, one problem in the Santa Barbara and some Mediterranean climate areas and worldwide now with climate change is a lack of water. So why is aquaponics? You're using water here. Does this water get flushed out and then refilled daily, or what happens to it?
No, in fact, the water stays in the system, and the longer that it stays in the system, the better the system becomes. That is one of the wonderful, powerful things about aquaponics is the fact that, no, we do not flush out the water. The thing that we do get outside is evaporation that we have to deal with, but that's about it. It uses 90% less water than conventional farming. And in Santa Barbara, I think we had about 7 inches last year, and the rate it's going, we'll be lucky if we get another 7 inches. So, for farmers and agriculturalists, this holds a lot of answer to the traditional ways that people farm and have water restrictions.
Yes, what struck me when I pulled up here was you said to drive up, park in the parking lot, and then the parking lot is actually where the whole system is located. So you're growing, I don't know how many plants you have here in a parking lot.
Yeah, parking lot is a good place to do an aquaponic system because there's not a lot else that's going to happen in a parking lot except for parking cars. The other thing is rooftops. Melbourne, Australia, some parts of Chicago now are putting aquaponics on the roof.
Wouldn't there be problems with the weight of the water?
Well, there's also a lot of rainwater that falls on roofs too, and there's certain things you got to do to make sure that you're not going to have a system come through the roof. But at the same time, it's only limited by your imagination of what you can do. Even in Japan, there's tremendous aquaponic systems that I think originally were more for show, like an ideal sort of like a village or a town sort of life. But a lot of the things that we create out of sort of, out of a creative sort of what-if scenario, later on, incredibly so, become the pattern of the future.
It looks like you used a lot of reused materials to build this. I know you said the totes were recycled, that you're doing this in a parking lot. So maybe share with our listeners what the startup cost was, and does this have to be a really expensive venture?
Well, so far today we put $7,500 in this whole thing, but we've probably got like 30% or at least 25% of the materials that we didn't use on the system in what we call the boneyard or the backyard, where we just put all the odds and ends. So that was because we were just like deciding how much we need and quantities and so on and so forth. So now we have a better idea of what to use and how to use it. That includes the fence that you see that was concreted in, hiring an auger because we have some really tough clay down there, and we had to do that to drill some posts. And so you say, well, okay, if you dug the post by hand, how much would that cost? And you say, well, then you could do away with having the auger and having a whole bunch of stuff. So it was like knock $1,000. The materials that we haven't used, that's easy another $1,500. So then you start getting the numbers down, and then you start, well, maybe we could do it for 3.5 or maybe less. But if you're around a construction site, there's so much stuff that you could salvage for basically your wood structures if you need it. Yeah.
And the totes were recycled, and it looks like you encased the tote in a wooden structure.
Yeah, it's in a wooden structure, and it's also insulated with insulation foam.
And the tote is where the fish live now.
Yeah, they live. Well, we also have them in the trough too, under the rafts.
Well, why don't we move on with the tour?
Okay.
Yeah,
sure.
that would be great. Go ahead and just start us from the beginning, and we'll work our way around.
Okay, so we have the fish in here, which is the IBC, and
the IBC tote.
Yeah, the IBC tote, and that sound you just heard is the bell siphon, and this will flood and drain like every 5-10 minutes. I think it's like 7.5 minutes if you want to be precise. So this whole thing fills up and then just drains.
So that's the bell siphon?
Yeah.
So basically you have two totes side by side.
Yeah.
One tote has the fish and the fish water, the water they're living in.
Yeah.
And then where does the water from the fish go?
It overflows into the
second tote?
Into the second tote, which has the hydroton and the bell siphon. And the water's continually flowing into this area. When it gets to a certain height, it triggers the bell siphon, and the bell siphon will flush the nutrient from the hydroton and flush into the rafts. And actually, this is the hydroton. You can smell this.
What does it smells like soil.
The hydroton actually, over a period of time, it has pretty much most of the nutrients that you would find in soil, and you can also add more in there if you want to create the conditions. They're called hydrocorn. There's another name for them, hydrocorn. And they're good because they're porous, and we want to encourage aerobic bacteria, so they're very porous. So there's a lot of air, there's a lot of aeration going on, and a lot of the microbial activities will happen in the little caves, enclaves of the hydroton itself. So the nutrient process, the nitrogen process happens actually in the clay pebbles. And we've got worms in there.
Really?
Yeah, and the amazing thing is, it does smell. It
smells just like soil.
It does. It's like it doesn't get mature to a point where it suddenly gets rancid and you have to empty it. As it lives and matures, it follows the balance of nature. So it's a complete ecosystem in here, and that's another benefit of aquaponics is compared with a lot of other different systems. Like hydroponics is great, but they a lot of times they have salt problems. Aquaculture is great, but a lot of times aquaculture has toxicity through ammonia. Not ammonium, ammonia.
From the fish poop.
Right, so in aquaponics it solves a lot of problems because the thing that can break down salts in a hydroponic system, the salts, is nitrates. And there's an abundance of nitrate in an aquaponic system. So you're sort of like, you're emulating nature, but at the same time you're sort of solving a lot of problems with a symbiotic system. And that's what I think aquaponics is. It's working sort of with all the principles in nature, and you have it essentially above the ground.
That is so cool. So here's the bell. Oh no, that's the other. So the bell siphon, that's in this pail, it looks like, right? This pail, there's a siphon. I guess that's called a bell siphon.
Yeah, that's
what does the bell siphon do?
Well, the bell siphon, you can see there's a cover which actually surrounds the tube. The tube is inside, and what happens is once the water reaches a certain height, the air pressure inside the tube, as you can hear that's releasing the air pressure, it starts the siphoning process. So the water is going from the bottom of the siphon up the siphon, and because of the air pressure in here is greater than the outside pressure, it forces the air down inside the tube and then into the trough.
So it's almost like a level where once it hits a certain level, it tells the system to drain the water out?
Yeah, it's sort of forced under pressure to drain the system. And the interesting thing is you can watch the inside of the bell siphon. We have a cover around, as you can see, the bell siphon, because we were getting tomato roots that were going inside the siphon and up into the tube, and they're kind of working their way around. And so we built the cover, as a guard, like a cover guard, so we can get at the roots. But the whole siphon, the water will fill up the hydroton area very, very slowly.
So I see water. Does it continuously run from the fish tank into this?
Yes, it does. And that trickling is almost like having a tap on, and it's just trickling in, and it takes quite a while, like 7 minutes, as I said, to fill up. But it only takes like less than 20 seconds to flush all that water out.
Really?
Maybe less. Yeah, probably like about 12 seconds to actually flush all the water out. So, and there's nothing mechanical about it, it's just physics.
And the tomatoes are actually growing in the hydroton, is that what it's called?
Yeah, and as I said before, we had a problem with the roots going into the bell siphon and then up in the pipe. And so one of the thoughts we had, well, should we not use any plants in the hydroton? But then we thought, well, this is a tremendous waste for an environment that's just ripe for growing things. So why not try and maybe we could grow the tomatoes at a certain height and then we pull them. But then as the tomatoes were doing so well, it kind of led me to thinking, well, what I need to put on this thing is a guard, or a way to sort of like keep an eye on the roots, not destroy them, but be able to let the bell siphon function at a correct level. And so we came up with that solution, and that way we could keep this enormous tomato bush.
So the hydroton is acting as the biofilter, is that correct?
It's a biofilter. The clay pebbles are the biofilter.
So what's it filtering and how does it do it?
It's more like, it's not filtering as a strainer would do so much, but what it does, it's more of a sort of a biocatcher of nutrient that is converted into nitrogen.
So the siphon now, it's lowering.
Yeah, there you can see it.
And now water is starting to rush into these long, are they troughs?
You can see under here, you can see the water barreling along. It's like, you feel that's quite a current there.
It's like a current, like a river current.
And so the idea of doing that was that we'd have a kind of a good exhaust that would actually propel the nutrient from the hydroton down into the raft bed. Now a lot of people have they have biofilters where they'll put the fish waste into like a tank, and they'll just kind of sit there, and then when it breaks down they'll pump it in with filters. But we decided that why don't we just try hydroton as the biofilter, and then the excess water out of that can just go straight into the rafts. And this is what we're doing, it's working perfectly.
Wow, and so you have this series of rafts. They're here, there's about, I don't know how many rafts you have here, and maybe describe the rafts to people.
Well, we have everything that we're doing is sort of an evolution in process. We're using thicker rafts. We're using rafts with different hole structures so that we can, anywhere from seedlings to small plants to plants that want to have a little bit more room. So it's a sort of an adaptation in process. We're using higher, thicker, closed cell rafts as opposed to like polystyrene or anything like that. They float higher than traditional rafts, and that's why we're able to put more holes for more production. So the rafts are sitting on about a foot of water. The periodically will go down about 8 inches, with evaporation. The water is probably, you could almost drink this water. I don't recommend it, but you could see how clear the water is.
These plants look really healthy. They're dark green and beautiful. So they're growing in water.
And here's the thing, even though it's like a foot or 8 inches, this is still called deep water culture, which is, go figure, why it's deep water, but...
Oh my gosh, the roots are massive. And God, some of the roots are red and purple, white. The water is clear and clean.
Yeah, it has obviously bacteria in it, but you can see it's not
slimy.
It's not dirty, and it's not dark green or brown. It's very clear.
This brings me to this issue of the roots are massive. Look at that one little plant. The roots are probably 10 times the length of the plant.
Plants have different root systems. They have kind of like a combination root setup, and one root section will just go down immediately to try and find water, and then they have another section of roots which are kind of like side roots, and they're sort of like they're looking more for nutrient content. They're sort of like taking up the nutrient. The long ones are, but they're primarily for water. So because there's so much water, the plant's thinking, oh goody, and it keeps sending more roots out. And I periodically will cut the roots just to sort of get rid of some of the root that's not really necessary for the growing of the plant. Not right up to its base, but I'll cut like a good foot of the root off sometime, because it's just, and it doesn't affect the plant. In fact, the plant seems to put on a spurt of growth too and carry on. It's that's something that I'm playing with, is the idea of maybe root systems are great, but maybe there's times when we don't need tons of roots kind of flailing around in the system, because there's all the nutrient they can get anyway. They're just, because they're a soil-based organism essentially, and water culture's like wee, they just go kind of
instant infusion of nutrients.
Instant infusion.
Now, how do you make sure that the plants get all the nutrients they need? They do look dark green and healthy.
Well, I'm trying I'm using a humus formula that has just about everything. It has everything according to the person that I buy it off of. I've been doing a combination. I've been using cocoa fiber with perlite and hydroton. I've been also playing with the idea of adding more micronutrients into the system. My involvement in that has sort of led me to talk to plant people. I'm not a plant person. I'm really learning how to do all this. I've been talking to plant persons, and just saying, well, my plants are doing this, or they're doing that, or what do they need, and all this kind of stuff. So it's a work in process. So I'm using humus, some compost, but making sure that it's not carrying pathogens as such, like where it comes. It's very important. Mixing it with coconut fiber, perlite, hydroton, and getting the right ratios is very critical to me. I was just using cocoa fiber, but in the beginning the system wasn't doing anything, and we had to supplement it with, there's some liquid supplements that you can use that are safe for fish. But I'm using a base in the baskets now that is a combination, so that the plants get their minerals no matter what. But what's in the water is sort of like is an extra additive, is an extra boost, and I'm so far I'm getting great results.
So I noticed these plants are just gorgeous. What are you growing now, and what have you had the most success with in growing aquaponically?
I think depends what time of year. One of the things I've really learned is grow seasonally, pretty much what the farmers grow. Find out what the microclimate is, and then grow accordingly.
You have these tomatoes which are just thriving. It's like a tomato forest.
They're getting sun, they're getting water, they're getting a lot of nutrients. So there's no, and tomatoes are actually perennials, they're not annuals. But most people sort of get rid of their tomatoes at the end of the season, saying, oh yeah, the tomatoes are dead.
They can't survive the winter.
They can't survive the winter because of frost. Well, in Santa Barbara, there's a little bit of frost, but because we're in an aquaponic system and most of the frost comes up through the ground, and we're above the ground, and we've got warm water, we pretty much think that we can keep our tomatoes alive through the winter, and that's what we're doing.
Well, there were many nights below 32 degrees, right? And how did your system do?
Fine. In fact, it's odd. The tomatoes kind of, and we've had a lot of high winds too, and the bush seems to know what to do. It sort of protects itself. It sort of gets low a little bit, and then as soon as the sun pops out, all the heads just kind of reach for the sun, and it hasn't stopped the production of tomatoes one bit. And it just keeps growing.
And what's the water temperature in the system?
Right now it's like probably like 70 degrees, 69, 70 degrees.
So when it was cold outside, did you come and check the water temp? What was it when it was below freezing?
Yeah, we have a bio water mat that heats up the water on the hillside, and it's what you'd use in a swimming pool.
So solar?
Yeah, so solar, and it's been going down to about I've seen like 64 was the lowest, but then that was in a day when it was like 35, 37. So it's impressive. So the system hung tough.
So
Yeah.
what are you growing here in these rafts?
Well,
You have
this is-
tomatoes in the hydroton.
Yeah, this is chard, and then spinach, arugula, broccoli, onions, scallions.
Onions, isn't that a root crop? Would that grow in aquaponics?
Well, it's like scallions, but I did have an onion in here to see what it would do, and it started to split the raft, so I had to take it out. And also a radish, radishes that when they were fully grown, they actually popped out of the pot more. So let me just tell you something about the broccoli. The broccoli grows in really, really small little punnets, little tiny plastic baskets, and they're about 2 inches round. And what happened was, the stem, eventually when the plant got to about 8 inches tall, actually leant over onto the raft like an elbow, someone's elbow, and then came up about an inch round, all the way up to about a 2-inch round top, and then produced a 7-inch broccoli head. And then the leaves came out about, I would say, like 2.5 feet from full width, from tip to tip, with a big old head in the middle and a tiny little pot at the bottom. And the broccoli, if it just came up straight, there's no way it could support itself. But it's sort of like it adjusted to the situation. They all did, in fact. It's almost like they knew what to do, it's kind of interesting. Like, who knew?
I know, the broccoli is gorgeous.
Yes, the broccoli grows just fine, and you can see. And we also have collard greens and
the kale is dark
nuts.
green.
You see how dark and leafy that is, and that's I'm letting the plants tell me what they need, and I'm really starting to learn the quality of the leaf and the broadness of the leaf and the beefiness of the leaf, and I want all those things because I want the thing to taste as good as it can and grow as powerfully as it can, because that's what's going to go into your body, my body, everybody's body. And it's just the basic food that you grow and eat is power food. If you have this stuff and you grow it right, vitamins and supplements are great, but if you eat real food and absorb it and let the body absorb it, this is what will sustain your life really well.
Wow, so I just see all of these beautiful plants. Lettuce, and is this watercress?
Yeah, this is watercress. Watercress grows in abundance, and you can see it right over there. First of all, it kind of sprawls, but then I've learned to just kind of clip the tips a little bit so I can keep it on one raft. Corral it, because it will just want to leg out. But when you clip the tips, it wants to go up and bush. The amazing thing about watercress, first of all, it's a good thing to eat for your body, right? Except if it's grown in polluted streams. But that's the other thing about cress for an aquaponics system, which is good because it really cleans up the water. It's like a filter. That is a water filter, the watercress. But there again, it can sort of have a life of its own. So you got to really sort of keep an eye on it.
You have to manage the cress.
If you want to start an aquaponics system in putting cress, that's a good way to begin, because that will grow. So,
I guess it is.
so
it
you
loves
look good
water.
in the beginning,
Hence the name.
What we have now also in the system is like poha berries that we're going to be growing, which is the poha berry is originally from Peru. This Latin name is Physalis peruviana. Or it could be called the Incan berry. And these berries were taken to South Africa, where they became the Cape berry and so on and so forth. But they have iron. They have they're one of the berries with the highest antioxidants. They have a ton of vitamin A, and they're super good for you. So, as well as that, we have stevia and have a bunch of other plants that are also growing in, and even some plants from Japan, and the list goes on. So everything we're sort of trying in this, we have dill for the to attract the ladybugs for the
beneficial insects.
So I could go on about the plants that we have because they're numerous, and more that we're going to introduce too. Yeah.
Now, you said there were fish under the rafts.
Yeah, we have about 26 catfish under the rafts, and these were fingerlings brought in, and we kept them quarantined in the big fish tanks over there. As in the video, you can see me kind of playing around with the fish. But
yeah, there is a video of Santa Barbara Aquaponics with Kevin doing a tour. If you want to see what we're talking about on my other business, Sustainable World YouTube channel, and you can see Kevin giving a tour and kind of see what he's talking about here.
Yeah, exactly. So a little bit hesitant about putting the small catfish in with the big catfish because they're like, oh, lunch. So I put them in the raft just to see how they would do with the plant roots. Catfish don't eat plant roots. Not, well, the ones I have, they don't seem to eat the plant roots. I mean, carp will, tilapia will, but catfish are really root friendly, so you can put them in your raft system and they're fine. And so now the fish in the rafts are about like 7 or 8 inches long, and they're growing faster proportionately than the ones in the IBC. I think because they have more length to swim, more length rather than depth, and that's what is increasing their size.
This is amazing. So underneath these rafts, there's catfish, and then are there any mosquito problems from having, I guess it's not sitting water.
We have mosquito fish in the system too, and mosquito fish are good. They eat mosquito larvae, but they also breed, which is a good thing too, and they'll eat pests and things in your system, and they're great little fish to have. They're great little fish. So
can we see the catfish under the rafts, or
no,
do they don't let you see them?
You won't see them. In fact, in order to see them, I have to take out that one raft and then move the rafts systematically side by side until we get to the very end raft. And I did that about 3 months ago because I didn't believe they were in there because I've never seen them. And then sure enough, when they know how to move and they know how to hide, and every single one of them they moved as I was moving, and I never saw them move right down to the end raft. So fish are amazing, but they're in there. They're definitely in there, and they're doing well.
Have you had a problem with pests at all? It doesn't look like it.
No, for the only thing that we had was things eat the leaves now and again, and we have to check just to see what's going on there. And a lot of times it's caterpillars. We haven't really had a problem with black fly. And I've watched the little birds that come in. We have a fence around this property, but the birds actually, I thought, well, the net keeps the birds out, but it doesn't. They get under. But what they do is, I just stood here one day when I was, just checking out the system, and this little bird flew in, and I just stood there motionless, and seeing if, and it didn't see me. It was just doing its thing, and I watched it, and it went from one end of the rafts to the other, and it went through just about every single pot, looking for little bugs and things and caterpillars. And I thought, well, you know what? The birds are actually beneficial. They're sort of cleaning up the place. So, yeah. And the stronger and faster the plants grow, and I have heard that they give off a pheromone to sort of repel insects and bugs and stuff. But as you can see, you see the colors of these and the way the vegetables are just shining and they're really thick and leafy. That's vibrancy. And when veggies aren't doing that, they're a lot more prone to pests.
So I see your shirt says Santa Barbara Aquaponics, Sustainable Farming of the Future. Maybe just give us 2 or 3 reasons why you feel like this is going to be a viable and important way to grow food in the future.
Well, I've heard that most of the wars in the future are going to be fought over water. And I don't see that we are going to, with population growth, that we are going to have a superabundance of water. And so I think that more and more alternative ways to grow produce organically is going to be is super necessary for us going into the future. And this is essentially the future that we're looking at and the way things will be done. There's going to be clashes, I think, over water usage and how things are grown. That is, I think, starting to happen now. But I think every individual has the right to grow their own produce and grow their own food. It's God's given right. The seeds are from the earth, and these produce seeds, and we use these seeds to grow more, and they thank us by growing and being vibrant. And I think it's a very empowering thing to do, is be able to grow your own food. I think it's essential. 2, it's good for you. And 3, it's the greatest learning process that I've ever encountered, is actually just growing things. It's such a thrill.
It not only teaches you as you're growing the plants, but you're connecting and participating in nature.
Yeah, it's just nature at work, and you're part of it. And that's your part to be part of it.
So you're not saying then that aquaponics will replace farming?
No, not at all. In fact, my grandfather was a farmer, and I have a long lineage of farmers, and so it's in the blood, which is like, it's funny, it's coming out in me. But yeah, it's not going to replace farming at all, traditional farming. In fact, I think farmers are very unsupported and need all the support they can get. And I see this as a complement to traditional farming.
You mentioned permaculture earlier. How did permaculture play a role in you doing aquaponics?
Permaculture, the more I actually took a course with Darren Doherty at Quail Springs, and that really was an eye-opener, because this is something I thought I can do. I can really do this because I have an understanding of it. And Darren is just a superb teacher, and he took us out in the field, and the way he explains things, and that really drew me in. I thought, this is where I want my life to go. Looking for something, and I said right there in the meeting, I want to do aquaponics, but I could see how permaculture would play into that. And it wasn't a question of, do I do permaculture or do I do aquaponics? It was like, how do I make all of this work together? And that's what I'm in the process of doing right now.
So for those who are listening who may not know what permaculture is, I tend to ask my guests, what's your definition of permaculture?
Okay, here it is. It's kind of funny because, just off the top of my head, you ask someone what permaculture is, and they'll immediately, they'll lift their eyes up into the air and they'll go, well, anyway, my understanding is it's a symbiotic relationship between animals, plants, and the earth. And to define it as perma, which is the part of permaculture, is creating essentially sustainable agriculture. That's the first part of it. And the second part is culture, which is creating culture that can live sustainably within an agricultural system. And that's my definition of permaculture. And then someone else is going to say, well, but you're not including this, this, and this, or you didn't say this, or blah, blah, blah. But anyway, that's, sort of in a nutshell, that's my version of how I see permaculture.
So when the time comes, have you caught any of your fish yet to eat?
No.
And how are you planning on doing that? And are you planning on doing that?
Well, eventually I think it has to be done. I'm going to transfer the fish that we now have into larger system. So they'll probably be used for that. But the day will come when, we're going to have to take them out and, do something with them. Or we just create bigger and bigger systems, and then we, free willy or something. I don't know. But I think the possibility is high that we'll probably be eating some of them, yeah.
And how do you do that? How do you kill them? Or harvest them?
Well, most of the fishermen down at the wharf will just stick them in a keep, or stick them in their esky or their igloo or their, cooler or whatever, and then the fish just kind of expire. I've seen, people electrocute them, and I've seen other people just pull them out and whack their heads off and, do stuff like that. But I don't really want to talk about this subject. Let's not talk about this subject.
Okay, we won't do that. Did you have experience working with fish before you started this? And what do people need to know to keep their fish happy?
Fish need, generally, clean water. They are animals that can get stressed just like people. They carry, parasites and diseases sometimes that won't be apparent until they're under stress, and those things will come to the forefront. The better the conditions for your fish and researching what the fish need is the best, prevention for things to happen that you don't want to happen. Basically, keep that water. Fish will live with bacteria, obviously, because bacteria is everywhere, but find out what they don't like. And generally, they don't like murky conditions. They don't like conditions that don't have a lot of oxygen. And there's exceptions, but mainly that's the exception. It's the same as saying, what do plants need? Plants need water and sunlight, and they need good sort of like fertilizers, essentially. They need good nutrient in the soil, micronutrients. They need minerals. They need all of that. You cover a plant up, it's going to die pretty quick from lack of sunlight. You make the water contaminated or it's high in ammonia, fish are going to die pretty quick too. So there's a lot of areas where, yeah, you can be an expert, but there's a lot of things that are just plain old common sense. And the more you research it, the more that you will become an expert, because you're not just learning from a book, you're actually doing it. And observation is 10 times, I would say, more powerful than just a book learning piece. Yeah.
So lastly, to close, so the water will come through the hydrotone biofilter, propelled down to the end of the rafts. What happens to the water to get it to recirculate?
Well, we just have a 37-watt pump, which is a tiny, tiny little pump at the end, at the corner of the trough. And we pump the water along the side of the trough, and then that goes into the IBC where the fish are. And then from there, it's just pumped continually into the hydroton.
Wow, so just the water recirculates continually.
Yeah. And we have it aerated. We have a diffuser, 2 diffusers, one inside the control box on top of the IBC that is got 4 diffuser heads that are going down inside the IBC, and then we have diffusers pumping oxygen into the raft because, roots like oxygen.
So the last question I have is, I see all these little seedlings that are popping up. Do you grow? Do you buy plants or do you grow your own seedlings?
Well, that's an interesting question. I have bought seedlings so I could see how they would do against seeded plants. And there are comparisons, there are differences. Sometimes something that is seeded will grow a little faster, a little more stout than a seedling first started in aquaculture, in an aquaponic system. But at the same time, once they're both off and running and they reach a certain size, it seems like there's not a lot of difference. The only difference is what is initially in the basket itself, it seems like, and how old your system is to, how much nutrient and bacteria is already in your system to sort of give the plants their growth, how much micronutrient is there. But I also feel that you can create your own micronutrient and give that to the seedlings, and that gives them a better start than just like starting them in coconut fiber and then just relying the aquaponic water alone. So I'm experimenting a little bit with biodynamics too, and I've got plants in different areas of this ranch just to see, okay, is this stem a little thicker than the other one? Has this got more fur on it? Is this a little bit more leafy green? Got some in a fish tank over there. I got some in a plastic pot. Got some in wood. And as you can see right here, I have some on the table, aquaponic table here. And you can see the difference in leaf structure and the stems and the way they're growing. And why in this area are they growing a little better than, say, that over there? So this is a constant testing of growth situations. One of the chief things that's occurring to me, if I basically shut up and listen and look at the plants and really check them out and taste them, and just by observation, I start to get real insights on, okay, this one needs a little bit more magnesium, or we're not getting the potash, or the nitrate levels are maybe a little too high in the system because there's certain things on the water I'm not liking very much, so we need better flushing action. Sometimes, just in this microclimate, I'm just learning about plants and I'm learning really what they need. But bottom line is, they'll tell me because I'll see by the condition that they're in. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm doing it at a sort of like intellectual level. Well, okay, if the leaves are yellowing or something, obviously I know what that is. But then how can I bring them up even more so they're really sort of having a good time? And that's almost like at a intuitive logic. It's sort of like getting more of an intuitive hit on where I go and then sort of intellectualizing it. And I say, well, it's this, this, and this. And it seems to be that way of thinking and becoming more of an all-round knowledgeable person with letting the plants kind of speak to me. It sounds airy-fairy, but if I let that process happen, it seems like the system really does a lot better. It sort of takes on the life of its own. And that's what I want to do, is just make it feel and that it is sort of just like this alive superorganism that is the giver of life. And that's what aquaponic systems really are.
That is great. So thank you so much for your time today. If someone wanted to find out more about Santa Barbara Aquaponics or reach you, how can they find you online?
They can go to santabarbaraquaponics.com and they can sign up for the newsletter and they can email me any questions and just fire away. And also check out YouTube, check out the YouTube videos, and the more you see, the more questions you'll have, and there's a lot out there to learn from. I'll help you, give you what I know, any advice that I can around what you're doing and where you are, and there's always questions about food and pH and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, I can definitely help you in those areas. If I'm not gonna. I love this so much that I'm willing to just give away free advice. Advice is free, essentially. So yeah, not a problem.
And anything that I missed that I didn't ask about, or anything you want to close with?
Well, I'm glad you came by, and you're a really nice interviewer. You're not intimidating at all, which is kind of nice, because I get nervous when I'm being interviewed, because that's not kind of what I think everybody does, but I do especially. But I'm getting used to it, so that's cool.
You'd rather interview the plants and fish?
Yeah, because they don't talk back, and they're just quite happy there. If I would say, don't be afraid to try it. Do it. Research it. Do it. Start small. Go big if you want to. But I'd start small and just do a little bit of reading and research, and then see what you've got materials-wise, what you can put together. Don't be afraid to do it. And then just kind of watch it for a few months, and then start learning about what you're doing. Because the microcosm is a lot of times the macrocosm. So if you can start getting proficient at a small system, then you could start handling a bigger system, like most things. You start small and then get a little bigger.
That's great. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming by.
You've been listening to a Sustainable World Radio podcast. You can find us online at sustainableworldradio.com and also on iTunes. For more information about permaculture and ecology, visit the Sustainable World Media YouTube channel, where you'll find videos about permaculture, aquaponics, organic gardening, rainwater harvesting, and much, much more. Sustainable World Radio is a listener-supported program. If you like what we do, please consider making a donation to the show. I'm your host and producer, Jill Cloutier, and thank you so much for listening.